that you can use to boost your studying as you're preparing for upcoming exams. So let's get started with today's agenda. So we're going to start with the workshop objectives. This just gives you an overview of what you'll learn, and then we'll go over the tools that we use, and we're going to jump right into the project. For today's objectives, we're going to first create and use a Google Cloud project. Now, a Google Cloud project allows you to use Google's entire range of APIs in a variety of projects. I'm not sure if any of you have taken the cross-platform development course yet, but you do utilize Google Cloud there to use the Google Maps API. So this is just a way to get a full range of access to Google's APIs without having to pay anything at all. It's completely free until you decide to publish your project, and then you'll have to start paying per use. We'll also create credentials to use Google APIs. So we're going to show you how to create API keys from scratch. And we're going to use Gemini for the question generation. And we're going to create interactive Google Forms with Python with Google Colab. So today's tools are going to be Gemini, like I said, for the question generation, Colab to write all of our code. We're going to be coding in Python, and we'll utilize Google Forms and Google Cloud. So the general steps that we'll take today is first creating a Google Cloud project where we'll be able to create an API key. We'll be able to enable the generative language and Google Forms APIs, as these are the two that we need to complete today's workshop. We're going to prompt Gemini to create a specific number of multiple choice questions. This can be any number. We're going to do 5 just to keep things brief for today's workshop, but feel free as you're testing it and utilizing it later to increase that number to 10, 25, whatever suits your needs. And we're going to pass it a text input from which it should generate questions. For the Google Forms quiz, we'll be able to create new Google Forms using Python and then update it with question items from Gemini's generated questions. And then we'll have the generated quiz link and we'll be able to test our knowledge and receive our score instantly. So let's get started. First, we're going to go to console.cloud.google.com. I'm going to share this link in the chat right now. You can also search for Google Cloud Console and it'll be the first link there. So I'll just share this link with everyone. And I'll give you all a minute to get here. Be sure to sign in to your Gmail account if you're going to be using this. And you can just give me a thumbs up if you have reached this page that I'm currently on. Okay, I see some people giving thumbs up. Great, great. We'll give everyone just one more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, so I hope everyone is here. What we're going to do is first create a project. So to do that, we're going to click up here. I'm not sure if you'll have it up here or if it'll just be across the page. I have used Google Cloud before, so that's why mine already has a list of projects. But click this button if it appears to you, and we're going to create a new project. This will house everything for what we're using the API keys for, so you can name it anything. I'm just going to call it a study quiz generator. And just click create. And then if you have other projects, you will need to switch to that project. So I'm just going to click select project in the corner just to make sure that we're in the right project. Now later, we're going to have to take note of this project number when we're using the code, but we'll keep that as it is for now. So first, what we need to do is create our API key. This will allow us to access all the services that we need from Google. So what we're going to do is click on APIs and services. It might take a second for the new project. And then we're going to go to library. This is where we're going to enable the 2 APIs that we need, the generative language and the Google Forms API. So what you need to do is just type in this search bar Google Forms. and it'll show you the options. We're going to click on the first one, Google Forms API. Ensure that it has the Forms logo. So we're just going to click this and click Enable. It might take a few seconds for both the APIs to work. So we'll just give it a moment. Okay, perfect. Now this API is enabled, and you can see that because now we have the disable option. So we're going to go back, and we're going to go to the library again, and we're going to enable the Gemini API. So just type into the search bar Gemini, and we will do this one at the bottom, Gemini API, not Gemini for Google Cloud or Cloud Assist, just regular Gemini API. So click this, and just like before, we're just going to click on Enable, give it a few seconds, and have it do its thing. Okay, this one has also been enabled. Great. Yes, I see that someone has a question. You can go ahead and ask.
Okay, thank you. I have missed the how can I create the project because I let's join.
Oh, it's okay. So have you gone to console.cloud.google.com? The link is in the chat
Yes,
if you need it.
I reached there.
Okay, so in the top corner near the Google Cloud logo, you should have something here that will allow you to create a new project. Do you see anything that says new project? It might look slightly different from mine.
Okay, yes, I get it.
Okay, so new project, completed. Just give it a name. You don't have to select an organization. Did it create the project?
It's still creating.
It should give you a notification in the right hand that you can now select the project once it's
Yes,
done creating. Okay,
I get it now.
okay, so select the project.
Okay.
Okay, so now you'll want to go to APIs and services, as you can see here. I can show it from the dashboard. That might be easier. Do you see something like this?
Nope, I didn't see that.
You don't see anything that says like APIs and services?
Nope.
No? None of the offered products for the project? It should show you everything that you can add once you select the project.
Like when I click select the project, it doesn't go somewhere. It doesn't go somewhere. It will come back to the previous page.
What do you see on that page? Could you send me a screenshot in the chat?
Sure.
Did everyone else manage to enable both of the APIs? Because we'll need these before we can create the API key.
I shared the screenshot.
Okay, you can click on Dashboard, and then you should be able to see on the side APIs and services.
Okay, now yeah, I can see now.
Okay, so I'll just walk you through the steps one more time of how to add the APIs that we need. So what you want to do is click on Library, and then we need to search for two APIs. First is the Google Forms API, so just type Google Forms and select the first one. Now mine is already enabled, but here you will see Enable pop up as an option. So just click Enable and allow it to load. Once you have that, you can go ahead and enable the next API that we'll need, which is the generative AI API. So just type in generative, and you'll see the Gemini API pop up. You could also search for Gemini, but there are more options, so this might be a bit easier. So just click the Gemini API, and just like before, you'll just have to enable it here with the button. Okay, now that everyone has their APIs ready to go, let's get started with creating our API key. So to create the API key, we have to go to Credentials. And this allows us to set the exact APIs that we want this key to be able to access. So first click Create Credentials and select API key. This is what we'll use in Colab to essentially link it to this project so it knows that it can use forms and it can use the Gemini resources. So this will create our API key, copy it to clipboard because we will be adding it manually into Colab. This is the easiest way that I found. So just copy it, and then we're going to click on the actual key itself because we need to tweak some settings. You can name it anything that you want, and here we're going to restrict the key. And we're going to select the APIs that we just enabled. So you can search here where you can see Generative Language API. That's the first one that we need. This is the same as the Gemini API. And next we'll need the Google Forms. So just select Google Forms API and click OK. It should show you that you have selected 2 APIs and give you the list here. And then just click Save. I'll leave this open so you guys can see it before I click Save. Make sure to copy the value of your API key as well, just so that we can use it immediately now in Colab. So give me a thumbs up when you guys have gotten this far. Be sure to click Save once you've done this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click Save because sometimes the API key does need 5 minutes to take effect. So in the meantime, we'll get started on some of the code. For that, you guys can go ahead and open up Google Colab, and that is just colab.google. I'll share this in the chat still. And we're going to open up a new notebook. And here you can name it anything you want as well. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is our API key. Over here, you can see a little key icon. This is where we add our secrets. So we're going to add a new secret, and we're going to name it, I'm going to name mine API key 2, just because I have others here. And then we just want to paste in the value. Oh no, I copied the link. Paste in the value of the API key that you had before. If you forgot to copy it or you've copied something else, just like me, that's fine. I'll show you how to get the value again. So we'll go to APIs and services, show key, and then copy here. Make sure you're copying the right key if you have other API keys available. So we'll just go back to our notebook and paste our value here. And then make sure that you toggle the notebook access so that it knows that it can use this API key. And we'll just hide this to keep it secure. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is actually install several packages to use generative AI, the authorization, and just ensure that we have everything before we actually import packages. So to do this, we can use pip, which is the default Python package installer. So to run commands like pip in Colab, you have to use an exclamation mark first. So we'll do exclamation mark pip install, and now we just need to list all of the packages that we need. So first is the Google Generative AI and Google Auth. And we also need a handful of smaller subsections of Google Auth. So we're just going to specify those here. And one last one, HTTP lib2. So these packages need to be installed first. So we'll just connect to a runtime and run this line before we do any imports. It might take a second to get the backend.
Alyssa, can you check the chat, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes, those are the 2 APIs that you need to enable, Google Forms and Gemini API. Generative. First, you have to go to the library. I can show that part again. So first, you have to go here to library, search here for You can unselect the Google Cloud API. That's not the one that we'll need for this project. So first, go to the API library. This is where we have to manually enable the APIs before we go into the API key credentials tab. So here we need to search for generative, and you can just search generative and select Gemini API. So you'll click Gemini. It should ask you to enable it here with a button. Just click enable. It'll take a few seconds, so just let it load and then it'll be enabled. And the other API that we need is the Google Forms. So we'll just go back to the library and type for Google Forms and take this first one here with the Forms logo and then enable this one. And now you can go back to the step that you sent a screenshot of, and they should both be there. That's how you'll be able to select them. So you can just search for Gemini API and Google Forms API. Okay, did everyone manage to install these packages in Colab?
Can you please copy the line of code and share it with us? It's quite long.
Sure. Okay. So that is the code for the installs. These are the packages that we'll need, and then we'll jump into imports. So I'll give you guys a minute to get the runtime up and running and get this installed. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up if you guys were able to install these packages? Nice. Okay. So let's get started with our imports. This list is pretty long, so I am going to just paste them to you guys in the chat because you don't really need to type these out by hand, and I'll explain them as we go along. So for our imports, this is our first step, is to import our libraries. So I'm going to share this with you. While I explain these, you guys can get these in. So first we'll need generative AI. This is how we'll be able to use Gemini to do the question generation. And then we need Google Auth and API Client Discovery. This will help us interact with the APIs using our key. We're going to use user data. This is how we'll access that secret as the API key that we put earlier. We need JSON to send our request to the Google Forms API. That's also where we use requests. And OS and auth are similar to the Google.auth as well. So let me know when you guys have these imported, and you can go ahead and run this chunk of code as well, just to make sure that everything is working with the installed packages and now the imports. Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. If you guys are ready to go, we can just do thumbs ups and we'll get going. Sure, I can show you the key. So once you have all of these enabled and you created the credentials, you can just, under APIs and services, just go to credentials and show key over here in the corner. So click this, copy this, and then when you go into Colab, you can click this key icon and add a new secret, give it a name, and then paste that value in. Yes, it's just one API key that will allow you to access both APIs. So you can enable any number of APIs theoretically that you need for your project, but they're all housed within the same API key, which is really convenient. Okay, great. Now we can start writing some of the code that we'll need to authenticate ourselves before we get started. So first, we need to find our project ID. This is here in our Google Cloud Console. And if we go here, the Cloud Overview and then Dashboard, we see the project number. Make sure that it's not the project ID as this won't work. So copy this project number and we'll just add another block of code. This is for authentication. When Colab is running things like this, it creates its own temporary project, but we specifically need Colab to use our project since we're using Google Forms. Otherwise, the authentication won't work and you won't be able to create the forms automatically. So we'll go ahead and call this project ID and we'll paste this as a string. So this is copied straight from our dashboard here. Now we need to authenticate. So we'll do auth.authenticate user, and we'll pass the project ID as the project ID that we just created. So we'll do project underscore ID. This is essentially telling Colab, we have to use this project because I have specific APIs that you need to access. Now we can set up our API credentials, and this is how we're going to start building our form. So first we'll do creds, and we don't need the other part that gets returned from this function, so we'll just put an underscore. This means that it can discard whatever else is returned from this function because we just don't need it. So we'll call this Google auth.default. And now when we run this code, you will get a pop-up to log in with your Gmail account and grant Colab access to certain things. Make sure to check all the boxes that it gives you, otherwise this might not work properly. And then we can use service to build our forms service, essentially. So we'll do build, and in quotation marks, we're going to put forms, and then comma, the next parameter is v1, also in quotation marks, and we'll pass our credentials that we just got. So credentials is equal to creds. Okay, so that sets up our API credentials. Now we need to set up the actual model where we're going to use the API key. So first, I'll just call this one my API key, and this is equal to user data dot get API key. Now mine is API key 2, but based on what you named it here in your secret, that is the name that you should put here between quotation marks. So just make sure that these match. And once we have that, we can call Gen AI to configure with this API key so we have access. So we'll pass this value here for our API key. Once we configure, we can now create the model that we'll call. So we'll just call it model, and we'll do genai.generative model. And now you get to pass the model type. So I'm going to go with one of the more recent ones, which is Gemini-1.5-Flash. So this allows us to authenticate and set up our APIs. I'm going to go ahead and run this code just to make sure we have no errors. This is where the pop-up will happen on this line of code. So you need to click Allow here to give it access to your credentials. It will ask you to select your Gmail account. And then just click Continue. Scroll to the bottom and click Continue. This grants us the access that it needs. And then this whole thing will run. And if everything is fine, it should give you a green check mark. So I'll give everyone a moment just to catch up to this and get authenticated with Google. Be sure to give me a thumbs up once you've gotten all the code in and also run it so that you can authenticate and log in. Let me know that everything is running smoothly. Sure, I can share the code. Just ensure that you replace the project ID and the API key too, where I did the user data.get. You need to change that to whatever you named it over here in your secrets tab. So make sure to change these two parts. Otherwise, this will not work. Okay, the code is in the chat. Yes, click on select all. Sometimes it shows you this page, otherwise it won't, but click select all and then click on continue. So for some of you who might be getting a different authentication page than me, Yumna just sent a screenshot where it asks her to select which, what things Colab can access. So just select all of these boxes and then click continue at the very bottom. If this is the page you got, sometimes it shows up as the page that I have. Sometimes it will show like this. Okay, great. Let me know if you're running into any issues at all with the authentication, if you need help with the project ID or anything like that. Otherwise, just put a thumbs up in the chat. Okay, I'm hoping you've all managed to get this authenticated. Now we're going to start getting into the functions that we'll need to utilize all of these APIs that we've enabled. So the first thing we're going to do is use Gemini to generate our quiz questions, and we're going to do so inside a function. So what we'll do is we'll create a function using def. I'm going to call it generate quiz questions. You can call it something shorter if you'd like. But this is where we'll pass our text so that Gemini can generate questions for us based on this text. Now, this prompt that we're going to provide Gemini with is quite lengthy, so I am going to share this in the chat. So just one second. On this first line here, we're going to paste this prompt, and I'm just going to break this prompt down for you. So what we need is 5 multiple choice questions with the correct answers. This is important to the generation of our quiz. This allows us to automatically grade it in forms later. This way we don't have to keep checking between the answers that Gemini gave us versus what we actually input in the form. We can create an actual forms quiz and have it graded so that you can see your score immediately. So it'll create the questions based on the text, and we pass our text between curly braces so that it uses that in the prompt. So whatever string that we passed as text, it'll be passed into the prompt. So the structure of our prompt is that we'll have the question 1, question text, we'll have our 4 options, and then the correct answer. Then it'll skip 2 lines and have question 2, the 4 options, the correct answer, so on and so forth. So this is the structure that we need Gemini to follow so that we can easily parse the questions, the options, and the correct answers into our quiz. So once we have our prompt, we can then send it to Gemini. So we'll have response equal to model.generate content, and we'll pass this our prompt. This is how we will, I think I'm tabbed too far in. Yeah, be careful with the tabbing in Python, it's very touchy. So just make sure that all of the lines are lined up and not with the string here. So now we've passed Gemini our prompt, and from this we will return response.txt. This will give us access to all of the questions, options, and the answers that Gemini has reported to us, so we can parse it in the next step. Okay, has everyone managed to have the generate quiz questions function? Um, Hussein, did you run the import code already? It might be throwing an error. Try and run the import block of code again and see if it still stays. No worries. Sometimes having the blocks of text in Colab can get a bit confusing if you can't remember what you've already run. Okay, so this is our generate quiz questions function. All we have to do is pass in some text, and Gemini will give us back the questions, the options, and the correct answer. Now that we have all of this information, we need to actually parse it into the quiz. But first, we need a quiz to parse data too. So we need to create a create quiz function. So that will be our next step. So now we'll define another function called create quiz. And something to note here is that when we're creating, like automating the Google Forms creation process, you have to create the quiz first, and then you have to pass it the questions. So I'm just going to show you something here from the Google Forms API. So when you're creating a quiz, which you can see here, you are only allowed to give it the title and the document title fields. You can't have any items, description, or settings. So we're just creating a boilerplate quiz with just the title, and that is it. But afterwards, we can update the settings using here, batch update. And this allows us to update the settings, add questions, remove questions. This is how we essentially edit the form through Python. So this requires a JSON type of representation, as you can see here. So I'm going to dive into all of this once we start writing the code. Don't worry. So first, we'll go ahead and create the quiz by itself. So to create the quiz, we need to pass it the questions. And these questions are what we will have received from the API, from Gemini. So we'll create a form and we'll structure this as a JSON. So we'll do info, and in curly braces, we need to specify that this is the title. And you can give this any name you want. I'm going to do a science-themed quiz. So I'm going to call this a science quiz, AI science quiz. And this is how we're going to create the form. This is all the information that it needs. So if we go here and we go to create, in the request, you can see that it needs an instance of form. So if you click form, this gets pretty convoluted later on, but the first thing we need is the info, which is required. So this is what will be returned to us, is the form ID, and this will allow us to identify the form later when we're using it in the code. But what we need to pass upon creation is this info object. So info has this object in parentheses. And if you click on info, you can see that you can provide the title, document title, and the description. But from the creation tab, we saw that it can only take the title and document title. So you can also add the document title that names it overall in your forms folder, but it's a pretty easy fix. If you don't specify this, you can just click it later and it'll autofill once you open forms itself. So here we're just specifying this title. So the structure is info, and then curly braces, title, and then the name of your form. And that's what we have going on here. So this is the structure for creating the quiz. This is the response the request that we're going to send as a JSON to the service. So then we'll do result, which is what we're going to get back from our service, and we'll do service.forms. parentheses, because this is a function, dot create, and now we need to pass that form that we just made as the body. So body equals form, and then to send it, we'll do dot execute, and that is also a function. So this result will give us back that response that you saw before. If I go back one page, the response will have this information in it, but all we need is this form ID. So to get the form ID, we're going to call this form underscore ID, and Colab is trying to autofill the code. So we'll do result, and with brackets, we can do form ID. And that is how we will access the form ID that we'll return. Oh, sorry, not brackets, dot get form ID. Yeah. So this will go ahead and create our quiz. But even though we have the quiz created, we still need to go ahead and update the settings to make it a quiz. So we'll do that now, and this one gets pretty long, so just stick with me here. I'll paste it in the chat afterwards as well. So we'll call this one update settings, since that is what we will be doing. And now we need to structure our next JSON. So essentially, we can send an array of requests each time we're going to do a batch update for the form. So here we just need one request, really. And I will show you the structure of requests. So from batch update, first we need the form ID, which is why we had to save it before upon the form creation. And then here you can see requests and then request objects. And this is how you can change any aspect of your form using code. So what we're going to do now is update the settings. But when we're adding questions, that will be create item. So let's see what's inside the update settings. First, you select which setting that you want, and also the update mask. This is what you use to specify which values will be changed. You can just copy the path itself from the settings. I'll show you what I mean now. So inside settings, we have to do quiz settings, and inside quiz settings, you just set is quiz to a Boolean. So in our case, because we want this to be graded automatically, we will set this to be true. So the structure of our JSON is as follows. So we'll start with requests, which is the baseline for what we need. We'll open curly brackets. We'll do update settings. We'll open another set of curly brackets. We'll say settings and another set of curly brackets, quiz settings. You've guessed it, another set of curly brackets. And now we can specify is quiz and set that equal to true. So this is our update settings aspect. What we need to do now is, in addition to settings, we also needed to pass it an update mask. So look for the second set of curly braces from the bottom, add a comma, and we're going to do update mask in quotation, open curly braces, and for paths, we're going to specify quiz settings dot is quiz. So the update mask specifies, like I said before, what values you want to change. And you need to provide everything below settings. This is how it's broken down for the update mask. It's assumed that settings is the baseline or the root, so you just need to specify everything else here that you want to change. Now, we're done with our request. Now we need to send it again, just like before, but this time we're going to be using something called batch update. So we don't need to return anything from this. We just need to send the request and have it be done. So we'll use our service dot forms, and this time we're going to call batch update. This is how we're going to update any and all information related to the quiz. So batch update, we'll do form ID, because this is how it's going to know which form to update. And then our body will be update settings. And now we just need to execute. And voila! This is how we will update our settings to have our quiz actually be a quiz. So I will share this update settings request in the chat with all of you. I know it can get a bit confusing. So that is the update settings request. You can just copy that and then send that in your service. So give me a thumbs up if you're able to get this much of the code going. And we're not going to run it yet because there is another thing that we need to do for the batch update where we actually use the questions that we passed here in the create quiz, just so that you're not creating a bunch of empty quizzes and filling up your forms drive. Okay, I can see some people have got it. Nice. I'll give you guys one more minute and then we'll jump into parsing all of those questions that Gemini gave us. Sure, I can share the cell code. You can name it something else if you, for the title as well here, if you're going to do a different type of quiz. It doesn't matter, whatever information you'll pass later, it's up to you. Just something identifiable so you'll know which quiz this is. Before we start writing the code to create our items for each question, I'm just going to show you the structure of that. It does get pretty nested, so don't worry. I'm going to 100% share the code for this part because it is a little bit confusing with all of the options. So for batch update, this time we're going to do create item. So in our request, we'll do create item request. And then you need to specify the item and the location. So the item is where we provide all of our question details, the title, the question, the options, that sort of thing. And then location is where to place it in the quiz. So you can specify 0 if you want it to always be placed at the beginning. This will have your numbers be backwards if you're starting with 1 through 5. It'll end up being 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Or you can specify an actual index as a number, which is what we will do here just to make sure that things are in the correct order. So for the item, there is quite a number of parameters, such as the title, the description. You don't have to do the item ID. This is what will be returned to us if we want to reference these items and edit them later. So this is not something that we pass, it's something that we will get back. So we'll do the title, description, and we're going to do a question item. So you can click here for question item, and then you can do either a question or an image. We'll do questions. It'll be a choice question, it will be required, and we can specify the grading, which here you just specify the point value and the correct answers. This is why we needed Gemini to give us the options in multiple choice. So if I go back a step, we'll do the choice question. And here we just specify all of the options, which is basically the values from Gemini. And we won't shuffle them. You can shuffle them if you'd like, but you don't have to specify that option as well. So let us jump right in to writing some more question code. So if I go to Colab here, we'll use the same code block for this. And the first thing that we need to do is work through that list of questions that Gemini gave us. So for the service, the form service, we need to send a list of requests. So first we need to create that list. So we'll just call it requests list, and we'll have this be empty. And as I said before, you have to specify the question location. So we'll create an index and set that to 0 initially, because we're going to increment this as we go along. So first we need to go through the question blocks. So for question block in questions, which is what we're passing in, dot split. And between each question, there will be 2 space lines. So we're going to separate it based on that delimiter. So between every set of double lines, that's a question. Okay, so now we have an entire block of questions. The question, its options, and its correct answers. Now we need to work through that. So first, we'll do if question.strip, question block.strip, just to ensure we have a valid question block. Now we need to start working through everything in this block. So first, we'll get each of the lines. So lines is equal to question block dot strip, and now we're going to use a single /n since these lines are only on the next line. There's not space in between them. So this will get each of the lines. I'll show you guys more of this later once we do the questions generation part actually. So now we'll do question text. This will give us the question that we want to ask. And this is simply lines 0. This is the first thing that should be in that question block. And we'll just do dot strip to remove any extra space. Now we need to do the options. So here we're also going to use list comprehension. So just stick with me for a bit here. I am going to copy this line in because it's a little confusing, but it's just easier to explain this way. Okay, so this is how we get all of the options. What this does is it'll cycle through each of the lines and extract the options, while also removing the letter in the beginning. So for line in lines, and we want to go from 1 to the second to last one, because if we remember, the rest of lines has the 4 question options as well as the correct answer. So we don't want the correct answer at the end. We just want those 4 options. So that's why we're going to 1 to length minus 1. This allows us to go from the first to the 4th option and exclude the correct answer. So we're going to find the closing parentheses, because if you remember in our prompt, we have a closing parentheses right before the actual option. So we don't want A, B, C, D in our quiz because we have those buttons to press in forms anyways. So we're going to remove this part. So that is why we have to find it, and this is going to give us the index, and then from that index plus 2, because back to the prompt, there's a space here. So to go from the first letter of the actual option, we need to add 2 to that index and go all the way to the end, which is what we see here. And we take that from the line. So for every line in our list of lines, we're going to find the start of that ending parentheses, add 2, and then go all the way to the end. This gives us each of our answer options in a handy list, as you can see here by these yellow brackets. So this list has all the options, 1 through 4. Now we need to extract the correct answer. So first we'll get the line for that answer. So I'm going to call that answer line. And then all we need to do is take the length of lines minus 1, and this gives us the last option, dot strip. So here we want it to go from 1 to length of lines minus 1, but now we actually need that line for the correct answer. And now we can extract it similar to what we did before. So correct answer is equal that answer line. We need to find in it the closing parentheses. 1 second. Not the parentheses, sorry. Correct answer. We need to find the colon or the correct answer. You can do either. I am going to do just the colon since that's the last thing in the line. And we will add 2 here to the index and go all the way to the end. And dot strip to remove any extra white space. So this is what we're looking for here. Previously, we're looking for this parentheses, but now we need this colon to get our correct answer. Once we have this, now we have all of the pieces that we need to finally structure our response. So we'll make our question item, and now we're going to start building that JSON. So the first thing we need to do, if you can remember, is create item. This is going to specify essentially the type of request. We'll open curly braces, and we need an item, and then we also need a location. So we'll start with the item. Here we can specify the title, and this will just be the question text in forms. That's what the title means. And now we can specify that we're going to do a question item. Question item. And here we'll put question, open curly braces, and make it required just so that if you're going to share this with other people, you can have a consistent scoring mechanism as well. This is another benefit of this project, is that you can have multiple people from your class use this to generate questions for different topics, and then you can all just share them together and have a whole plethora of study material to help you in your exams. So we'll have this be required. We'll make it a choice question. There are other options if you want to do multiple select, but that's just not going to be covered in today's workshop. And then for the choice question, you have to select the type. So here we're doing radio. Otherwise, you could do the multi-select like I said before. And now we need to specify our options. So here we give it a list of values. So we'll do value in quotation marks, and we'll pass it an option for option in our options list. So for every option, we need to pass it as value because this is the specific way that this request needs to be structured. And that ends our options. So now we can also add grading in our next section here. And this is how we're going to get our automated scoring. So first we'll do a point value. You can set anything here. I'm going to set 1. You can do 2 or 5. This just changes the score at the end. So for my 5 questions, it'll be out of 5. But if you increase that to 2, then it will be out of 10. So then we need to specify our correct answers. Now, even though this says correct answers, you can only provide one like we will do here. So we'll do answers. And the value here will just be our correct answer that we had before. So value, sorry, this should be in quotations, similar structure to the last one, and we'll put correct answer. Not in quotations, sorry. Correct answer. Okay, so the last thing that's left in our request is to just specify the location. So we'll do location, and we'll pass it that index that we made before. So index, and we pass it index. And that is our entire request. So this will essentially add this question item over and over and over to our list for each question that Gemini gave us. So now we need to actually append it to the request list that we made before. So we'll pass question item, and then we need to update that index to make sure we're not placing them all in the same index. So we'll do index plus 1. Now, we have all of this, and I'm going to share this with you before we move on to the next section, because all that's left now is to do the batch update, and then we can start running some code to get some responses. So I'll just go ahead and share this here. And this is our request that we need for our batch update. Now we can go ahead and start building the body and using our form service. So body, and we'll open up braces because everything has to be in the JSON format. We'll do requests and just pass it our requests list. Now we can call our service.forms.batch update again, because this is how we access anything for the form after form creation. And we'll pass it our form ID. And then in the body, we'll just pass the body that we made before. And lastly, .execute. Now from this, we will get the form URL that we can make ourselves using that form ID, because now the form's finished. We can actually go and visit it. So form URL, and we'll just format the string here because we will be using a variable. So https://docs.google.com/form/d. And then here we can pass our form ID, and this URL will take you directly to the form. So we'll just return form URL at the end of our function. Okay, I know that was a lot, but this is the end of like the bulky code that we need. Now it's all just function calls, passing in our prompt, and the code will do all of the work from here. So let me know if you've managed to get this create quiz function going. I'll just run this to ensure there's no errors. Don't remember at the end, after you have your question items, you need to append them to the request list and then update the index that we had before, and then create our request body and pass it to service forms, and then we can create our form URL. So I will also just share this entire code block so you have everything in one place. And give me a thumbs up if you've managed to get that code into your Colab. Okay, great. I can see that some of you are getting it in. All right. Now it's just calling all of our functions. So the first thing we need is the text that we want Gemini to create the questions from. This would be any of your class notes or text from the slides that you have. So I'm just going to grab something from Wikipedia that I had before, and I'm going to do the triple quotation marks just so it's not running off the screen. And then here we go. So this is just a simple paragraph that I got from Wikipedia to demonstrate this. And then we'll generate our questions by calling our generate quiz questions function. And we'll pass it our user text. And I'll also print these questions just so that you can see that the structure we asked Gemini to use is actually being used. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And this might take a second. But here we can see that we have our question, the options, the correct answer, and then a space in between. That is what we needed to do the question block delineation. So we'll just hide this output because it's quite lengthy. And now we can go ahead and create our quiz. So we'll do quiz link, or we can actually directly print create quiz and pass it our questions. And then we just run this. And if everything is fine, we should get a link. Okay, so I think I missed something in the JSON. Okay. Just 1 second while I double check all of these options because there is quite a bit going on here. Just a second, guys, while I try to debug this. Okay, so the problem was actually in the prompt, so I'm just trying to fix that really quickly. Okay, so for my debugging, it seems like the options value isn't updating, as in the way that we're parsing the options isn't producing a value. I'm not sure what's wrong because I ran this code earlier today and it worked fine. So I'm not sure. I can share with you the working code and we can run from there. And I will also share the link to that as well. So I will share that screen instead. Okay, so this is essentially the same code, and this already has the keys. So I'm gonna run all of this, and we'll see the quiz link at the end. I will be sure to double check what's wrong with the code that I wrote today with you guys versus before, even though I can't see any difference right now, but I'll double check. This is really odd.
Alyssa, your mic is muted.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I'm not sure what's happening now with the create quiz function. This was all working right before the workshop, and now I'm getting HTTP 400. So invalid grading. I think it's something. Wait, I think it's this. Okay, I will show you one of the forms that has been created here. So okay, so this is one of the quizzes that gets created. It has the options for the questions, and you can only select one. I will go to the responder link. The link that it gives you when you run the code, and I will give you the working code, it sends you to the editing page, so you have to go to the responder link. So I'll just go here. And you can see the point value in the corner that each question is also required. So I'll just run through this with some random answers. And when you click submit, it will ask you if you want to see your score. And it'll open a new page. And you get to see all of the points here. So I will double check why this project is suddenly giving HTTP 400, and I will share the working code ASAP. So does anyone have any questions on the steps that we took tonight? Okay. Thank you, Yumina. So I will share the code with you guys right after the workshop is finished once I figure out what has suddenly gone wrong in the world of Forms API. And I will get back to you with the working code. Thank you all so much for attending tonight's workshop, and we hope to see you at the next Build with AI workshop as well. There is not